Hello and welcome to Doug's Front Porch, a podcast where I get to sit down with friends, old and new, and have honest conversations. Today I welcome to the front porch Jess VanGorder King, a former student who I haven't had the chance to talk to in a while, and I'm so excited that she agreed to come on so that we can catch up and hopefully have some good conversation. Welcome, Jess.
Hi, Doug. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you agreed to come on here. It was kind of out of the blue, I'm sure.
I'm excited, but I'm nervous. I've never been on a podcast before, so.
Oh, that's all right. Hey, so I want to start with this question to talk about. So, growing up, you were the middle child of three. I was the oldest of two, and there's all these stereotypes out there about the middle child. So, what was that like from your perspective, being that middle child?
I was definitely the black sheep. That much is true. Um, well, you've had my younger sister, so I'm sure you can imagine what growing up with that princess was like. Um, no, I mean, it was good for the most part. I was very close with my dad. I think a lot of middle children experience that. But I definitely felt overshadowed a lot. My older brother was well, my parents would hate me for saying this, but we always felt like he was the favorite. And my sister, he could do no wrong, and then I came along and did everything wrong, and then by the time my sister came around, she just kind of got away with everything. So, um, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it was
Okay.
good.
Okay. How did that experience, being that middle child, influence who you are today?
Oh boy, I didn't expect such soul searching questions right off the
Oh yeah,
bat.
we're coming up right off the bat. We're going right at it. I mean, do you feel that it did? Maybe it didn't. I was just wondering about that.
I'm sure that it did, but I've just never really considered that before. I mean,
Okay.
um, I was definitely I was very stereotypical in that I felt like I had to rebel quite a bit. Um, so after high school, especially, I really embraced that black sheep stereotype of the middle child, and I think that influenced me a lot because I experienced a lot of things that pushed me in a path that I otherwise wouldn't have gone. But it definitely, I mean, it worked out for the best. But I think
Okay.
that had I not been the middle child, then I probably wouldn't have had a lot of those experiences.
Sure. Sure. And you recently got married. Really recently. How long ago was it?
It was 2 months ago, February 28th.
Right. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that because it wasn't a traditional normal, I guess we could say, wedding. And you can explain it, but your husband is in the military.
Yes.
And explain how that came about, that the wedding happened so quickly a little bit.
Yeah, so he was prior service. He decided that he wanted to rejoin with the Army. And we knew that, military life is just easier to be married, um, especially if I wanted to go with him wherever he gets sent. Um, we had talked about marriage already. I mean, we moved to Texas together after a year, and so things were already really, really serious and heading in that direction anyway. And then when he decided to re up with the Army, they were like, "Okay, cool, you're leaving in 2 weeks." Um, and we were like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess that means we have to get a move on things." We had planned on. He had proposed at the end of January, so we knew before he signed his contract that we were getting married. But we had planned on doing a ceremony with friends and family in the summer,
Sure.
and then they told him he was leaving very soon, so we had to end up just doing a courthouse wedding here in Texas.
Uh, was that, I mean, what were some of the cool things that came out of that experience, though, that maybe you didn't think would happen because, you had in your mind, oh, we're going to have a family wedding with friends and we're going to do it in the summer and everyone will be there that I love. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, this is going to happen right now, which probably was kind of hard to swallow, I would imagine, at first. But what was something maybe that happened or came out of that experience that you weren't expecting, that was a positive or a really neat experience maybe?
It really so I don't know if you know this about me, but I have a hard time a lot believing that I'm cared about by a lot of people. Um I'm just kind of a loner, so I don't always feel like there's a lot of people in my life. Actually, that was one of the things I was thinking, wow, if we have a real wedding, who's gonna come? Um,
Right.
but it we had an amazing turnout. Adam's best friend, who he lived with previously in Pittsburgh, where we met, drove 25 hours straight to be at our wedding. He brought two of Adam's other friends. His mom and sister flew. They bought a plane ticket that same week and flew down and came to our wedding. One of my newest friends here in Texas drove half an hour to come be at the wedding and be our photographer, actually. And some of his coworkers and my coworkers showed up. So I was expecting it just to be me and him, and it ended up being a group of about 15 people that came to the wedding.
Well,
Um,
that's a really nice, pleasant surprise, right?
and my entire family watched it on video chat. So
Oh, that's cool. That's
yeah,
really cool.
so we had a viewing party and it was good. I mean, I actually I wouldn't change it, to be honest. The only thing that I would change was that my family could have been there in person, but it was
Right.
it was no stress. It was a beautiful day. We had a picnic in the park afterwards. I mean,
Yeah, the pictures were beautiful,
oh,
absolutely
thank you.
beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you today was because of what you do for a living.
Okay.
And I'd really like to talk a lot about that because I think you have a job that a lot of people maybe don't understand, appreciate, um, don't quite know like what that job actually is. So let's talk a little bit about that. You graduated high school, went to college, and you majored in history in your undergraduate, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And then you did grad school at Duquesne, where you got a degree
Public history.
in public history. So what's
Yeah.
just for as I'm curious about this, what's the difference between a normal history degree and a public history degree?
Yeah, so with a history degree, you're typically focusing on a specific time period of history, um, and you kind of become an expert in one era or facet of history. Public history, the majority of your classes are learning how to take that history that you're interested in and repackage it for the general public. So they talk a lot about like Ivy Tower history, academic history. Public history is very much making history accessible to your everyday person.
So what made you want to go that route?
Um, when I decided to pursue a history degree, because I originally went to school for journalism, um,
Mhm.
and I hated it. And when I went when I went back to school, I thought, if I'm gonna spend years of my life doing this, then I want it to be something I'm really interested in. And history has always been my subject. But then, of course, I thought, well, what am I going to do with a history degree? Um, I never really thought that classroom teaching would be the right path for me. Um, so I was talking to my advisor one day, and he said, "Well, there's this path called public history. You can work in museums." And I thought, "Wow, that sounds really, really interesting. I love going to museums, and that's such a different way to connect people with history." I found my love of history at the Gettysburg Museum. It was
Mhm.
just such a different way of getting people to have that aha moment. Um, and so that's what I decided to do. I knew I wanted to do something with history, but wasn't sure what. And then when I realized that public history, museums, national parks, and stuff like that was a path, I knew that that was the right one for me to take.
So during your graduate studies, did you get to intern at a museum in Pittsburgh?
I did. I interned with the Fort Pitt Museum in downtown Pittsburgh that they
And,
do
and
French and Indian War history.
right, and when you were there, was that also you were like, yes, I know this is the right choice, going down this road.
Yeah, I had a fantastic advisor for that internship, and I actually spent every day in 18th century costume shooting flintlock rifles, and it was just the coolest thing in the world, and I was getting paid for it. And I was like,
Right, right.
"Yes, this is what I want to do." And we would do campouts. I mean, for anybody that's ever worn 18th century clothing, it's terrible. Um, it's hot and heavy, especially for women. But I loved it. And we would do these campouts where, we'd sleep in tents and you could only cook authentic 18th century period food over the fire. And we would go out and have shooting contests with the flintlocks. And I just loved everything about it. So I knew that just cemented that I was in the right path.
Right. So a quick shout out then for any of our listeners that are in the greater Pittsburgh area or in the greater Pennsylvania area, check out Fort Pitt uh, to see some of this live history, living history portrayed, right?
Yes, absolutely. They're a fantastic museum.
Awesome. So you graduated,
Mhm.
and as you said, you moved to Texas, and you're in the greater Dallas area right now, correct?
I am right in Dallas, yes.
Right in Dallas.
Yeah.
And you tell me a little bit about your job now. What you're at a museum. What's the name of the museum? And describe the museum a little bit. Like, is it how big is it? What type of history does it tell? Those types of things.
Sure. So I am at the Old Red Museum of Dallas County History and Culture. It is located in the original courthouse that was built in 1892, right downtown Dallas. It's actually one of the only pre, I would say probably pre 1920s buildings left in Dallas. Um, and we cover everything from prehistory up through modern day that has anything to do with the city of Dallas.
Okay. And what type of crowds is it? Is it geared towards any age group, or are there like age group specific displays? And how much like what is your role at the museum?
So we target all age groups. We do have a very specific gallery that's our interactive children's gallery. We have a lot of touch screens and things like that for kids to play with. I'm the education and programs director at Old Red, so it's my job to entice all ages to come in and want to learn. And we do a lot of programming from pre-K up through senior citizens.
And is the museum publicly funded, or is it privately funded, or a mixture of both?
It's a mixture of both. We're a nonprofit, obviously, and our building is actually owned by the county. So we get a lot of help from the county.
Okay. As I imagine, then school groups are coming in, and if they do, like on a field trip, do you get the chance then to interact with those kids?
Yeah, so I'm actually the only one in the education department right now. So I handle everything from booking logistics, I plan all the programs, and I teach all the programs. So I have anywhere from I would say probably 200 to 500 kids in a week in our busy season, field trip season, and that's anywhere from kindergarten up to 12th grade. And we do probably our most popular program. It's so cool. We have the original courtroom preserved and restored to its 1900s look, and we do mock trials with our students in there.
Oh, that's cool.
It's
Yeah,
very
that's really
cool.
neat. Do you find that most kids seem engaged when they're at the museum or disengaged?
I think it depends on what the program is that their teachers have reserved for them. Definitely, our court cases get a lot of interaction from the students, and they're really engaged and they love it. And they all oftentimes want to redo the court case and see if it can have a different outcome. Um, Older kids, I really shouldn't say this. I'm gonna get in trouble.
Well,
Older
well,
kids are
don't say anything that's going to get you in trouble, Jess.
kids
I
are
work with high school students every day, so I know
so
what the
you
typical high
know.
school student's
Okay,
like.
you know.
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to reprimand a student while at the museum?
I gotta tell you, that's something that I still need to work on as an adult. Um, well, and I some of these high school kids that come in here look a lot older than I do. And so, and so it's hard to like discipline somebody that towers over you. So
Uh-huh,
that's
uh-huh.
still something I'm learning how to do. Um,
Okay,
I've
okay.
I've had a couple situations where I just can't even believe that a student did what they just did, and I've had to step in and discipline. But thankfully, that's few and far between.
Good. That's good to hear, that's good to hear. What do you think is the hardest part of your job?
Ooh, hardest part of
Or
my
what is
job.
something that is hard maybe, in regards to your job?
I would say, well, and maybe this is just hard for me because I mean I grew up in Pennsylvania with the Pennsylvania school
Uh-huh.
system. One thing that's really hard is learning the Texas school system. in matching my programming to fit their curriculum, and also just,
Oh, okay.
I mean, I didn't know anything about Dallas apart from, the JFK assassination before I moved here. So I had to learn all of that history as I was working. I'm teaching
Right, right, right.
teaching stuff that I'm learning as I go. So that's a little bit challenging, but the especially historic education, history education is it's different down here than it was in Pennsylvania.
Oh yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm not familiar at all with the Texas school system and how they teach history at all. But I would imagine every state probably has its differences in how it approaches history. Um, that here comes a question that I wasn't even thinking about asking. Having grown up in the system in Pennsylvania that you grew up in, what do you think Pennsylvania is doing right in regards to teaching history, and maybe where or what could we be doing better?
Ooh.
From your professional standpoint now that you've been out, you have your degrees, what do you wish, maybe thinking back when you were a student, what do you wish you had learned more about in history class that just didn't happen in high school, um, because of whatever reason?
Um, well, we, especially in Central PA, we focused a lot on the Civil War. Um, we focused a lot on the Revolution, being so close to Philly, and also the Civil War, which I shouldn't complain because I love studying the Civil War. It's what I do for a hobby.
Right.
But I wouldn't say that it's not really wrong. It's just it's taught from such a. Here's what both systems do wrong. They teach it from
Okay. Yeah.
a very, very specific viewpoint.
You're saying both Pennsylvania and Texas?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I, and shout out to Mr. Baker, um, fantastic history teacher. He really sparked my interest in the Civil War. But I grew up, the Civil War and you get a very specific look at why that war happened and the aftermath and the all of that from a northern perspective. And now down here all these kids are seeing it from a different perspective. And I feel like, and now that I'm older and I can see it from both ways, I feel like I have a much better understanding of our history as a country.
Okay.
And I think that a lot of, like, before that, I had an understanding of our history from like a very not, I don't want to say tinted, but a Pennsylvania viewpoint, a northern viewpoint.
Sure. Right.
And a lot of kids down here have a very southern viewpoint. And I think if we can do better at teaching more, is unbiased the right word, I guess?
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
A more well-rounded understanding of why our country has taken the steps it's taken and why we're where we're at. And I also wish that both systems would teach more modern history. I mean, we stop at what, World War II, and there's so much after that that's important to understand.
No, I agree with you on that. I also teach history, and I think it is important that it's important, of course, to get through World War II and
Oh,
understand
of
all of
course.
our early history, of course. But you're right. I think that and it's kind of weird for me now, having lived through the 80s and the 90s and the downfall of the Soviet Union. To me, that I lived it, so I know that history. But I
Mhm.
have students now in my classroom that are all born after 9/11.
Mhm.
So they don't have any they have no physical recollection or experience with the Soviet Union, with the fall of communism, with 9/11. They only know, now they're learning about that history from the perspective that I learned about things that happened before I was born. And that's something that I keep having to remind myself in the classroom. That's like, oh no, these kids don't know what America was like before 9/11, and they don't really understand how it's different now than it was, September 10th, 2001. Just something little like that. But it's difficult looking at from the teacher's perspective too. And of course, I think there's always going to be some bias in the classroom because we're telling, if you're teaching the Civil War, and you were born and raised in the North, you are going to have that
Oh, yeah.
perspective, of course, and I agree with you though that we should be striving to present both sides at all times, so that both sides so that the student sitting in the middle, and that's, I'm sure, what you did, when you were doing through your college history courses and stuff, where you're trying to find, okay, what is the actual reality of what happened, as opposed to even what are the books telling us happened, because authors are biased too.
Mhm.
And we have to try and, through primary sources and so forth, really try and muddle through and figure out, so what is the real cause of X, or what were the actual things that led to X happening, etc.
Now that you say that, that is something that I think, I never worked much with primary sources up through 12th grade. It wasn't really till college that my history professors taught me really how to use primary sources. And it's something I use a lot in my museum programs, but I think
I'm sure,
a
yeah.
lot of, and social studies gets the short end of the stick these days.
It
And I
often does.
and I
Yep.
know it's hard to fit everything that needs to be fit in a year. Um, but there needs to be more primary sources, and I know that, like, 1700s, the revolution, all that stuff, that's important history to know, but it's really important to know post World War II as well, because that's really what's affecting a lot of these
Correct.
kids' worlds now.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Um, what's the coolest artifact at your museum,
Oh,
in your opinion?
hmm.
Or what's an artifact that is really cool?
Well, the most popular artifact that everyone
Uh-huh.
comes to see, is J.R. Ewing's hat from the hit TV show
Oh
Dallas.
my gosh. I thought that was in the Smithsonian, so that's actually at your museum.
Yep, that's at our museum. Um,
Everybody comes to see the J.R. Ewing hat. That's great. I was
eh,
expecting something like, I don't know, from the Alamo or something.
we don't
1980s TV.
no, we don't have anything from the Alamo. Um,
Okay.
we have the world's first frozen margarita machine.
Okay.
That's pretty important. Um, let me think. Coolest artifact. Oh,
Or
that's
one that, when you got to actually, like, something that you got to handle, that you were like, I can't believe I'm actually allowed to touch this.
oh, hmm. They don't let me handle a lot of
Oh,
artifacts.
okay. Okay. Fair enough.
I'm the educator. They know that anything that gets in my hands, I'm gonna want to mess with and play
So
with and see.
you don't have any responsibilities of, like, putting displays together, or physically, setting up the museum?
Not really. I mean, we're such a
Okay.
small staff that when stuff does needs to be changed out, we all help out.
Okay.
But no, I'm not really. I don't even have a key to the archives. I'm not really allowed. But a really cool thing. See, I'm very fond of, like, little knickknacks and weird pieces of history that are just like.
Sure, sure.
So I was teaching a program on the Texas Fair Centennial, and we got to dig through the archives and find all of these old postcards that were written from the fair and all this stuff. And but this was 1934, and there's this little walnut shell. It's like a half shell of a walnut, and it's stuffed with miniature pictures. And it just says, "The fair in a nutshell," and it's like 50, like the size of my pinky nail, pictures of the fair shoved in a walnut shell.
That's
Um,
crazy.
and I was just like, "This is so weird," but I love
Yeah,
it.
right.
I kept it in my office for a little while, but they made me give it back.
Yeah.
Um, we also have, I mean, I don't know, we just have so much cool stuff, and we cover such a vast portion of time
Okay.
that it's hard to pick just one.
Okay. No, fair enough. Fair enough. What's one thing you wish that more people knew about museums that they don't know?
Oh, they're not just a bunch of dusty old things behind glass. Especially
Explain that to me. Yeah, I agree with you.
especially nowadays, I mean, museums strive to be interactive and hands-on, and we no longer we no longer say here's an object, here's what is important about it. It's here's an object, what do you think? Or how can you look at this differently? Or you tell us the story, or you help us tell the story of this. It's no longer one-sided. Um, the public has a greater opportunity than ever to help tell the stories that go into museums. And we appreciate when people help tell those stories. It makes it
Right.
a community project, and I think that's really important. And it's not, you know, museums have something for all age groups. I mean, I have had older people in there just as excited as a first grader learning something for the first time. I mean,
Sure.
yeah, so that's what I
No,
wish.
I agree that I've always looked at history at from that perspective that history is storytelling, and what is more entertaining and encapsulating than a good story? And if you have the right person telling the story, I don't care how much anybody hates history. I think you can pull people in. And I think some of the best museums are the ones, like you said, the ones that are interactive, that get the people actually beyond just walking through the hallways, looking at this, looking at that, and then making their way to the gift shop and then leaving. You know, a museum should pull you in some way as a person going to it. I agree with you.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't care what people say. There is no fictional story more exciting than real history. And it really, like, history is fascinating. There are so many stories that are just like you said, if it's told as a good story, fascinating. Absolutely
Yeah, no, I
fascinating.
agree. I agree 100%. If you could work at any museum in the world, which one would it be?
I want it's not well, okay. I my dream
Yeah,
job is to be a battlefield guide at Gettysburg.
that would be cool.
That is my
That would be
dream job.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities at all.
I hope not.
I hope not either. I'd go on your tour. I would absolutely go on that tour. Let's talk let's leave shop. We talked a lot about your job, and I think it's absolutely fascinating. I hope someday, I don't know how long you plan on being in Dallas, but if you're there and I get the chance to come down, I would absolutely love to see you at work in that museum. I love museums. I wasn't the typical kid growing up. We went to museums and I loved them. Just I guess that's always talked about my love of history, but let me ask you this question.
Mhm.
So, Jess, what do you do to relax? What's your go-to? Some people I've been interviewing on this podcast, I've had quite a lot of runners that that's their form of relaxing and blowing off steam. But what do you do?
I read a lot.
That's cool.
Um,
Is it always historical stuff?
95% of the time, yes. Um,
Uh,
I have one book series that I read, I would say probably twice a year, that is like my escape from real life. Um,
okay.
it's actually a German author. Uh, I'm gonna butcher her last name. Funka? Cornelia Funka, is that her name? The Inkheart series. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I haven't. I haven't.
Um, my books are so worn that the pages are falling out because I read it so much.
Oh my
But
goodness.
those
That's great.
those are my escape from stress, escape from the real world books, go-to books. And other than that, yeah, I'm reading nonfiction.
I find nowadays that I almost predominantly read nonfiction. I haven't read a, a work of fiction other than a couple, short story here or there. Um, but I haven't read a novel in a long time, and I kind of feel guilty about that. But I just love picking up a good biography or a really good historical text. That's what I enjoy reading too.
Have you
I
read a
don't think that makes us weird.
have you read a good biography lately? I'm looking for new ones.
Uh, the last really good biography that I read was one on Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which was he was a Lutheran pastor that was persecuted by the Nazis during World War II. He ended up being imprisoned and then eventually died in captivity. Fascinating, fascinating guy. That was the last biography that I read off the top of my head. After that, I'd have to think. I want to read the Grant book by Chernow, but
So good.
I didn't even buy it yet. I looked at it a couple times online and I never pulled the trigger. but that is on my list of future books to read for
It's so
sure.
good, and they're making a mini series on it on the History Channel now.
I saw that. I saw some previews for it. It looks good. It looks good.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Grant's fascinating. Yeah.
It's about time the History Channel does something worth watching.
Uh,
I'll never get
Ancient
a job.
Aliens isn't working for you.
Oh, I'll never get a job for them now. That's okay. Um, no, I hope it's good though. I mean, that's one of the best biographies I've ever read.
Oh, okay. Well, now you're really making me feel like I have to read it. And like I said, it's on my list. I just haven't gotten around to getting it yet. But I will. I will. I promise.
Okay, good.
All right. So I close all of my interviews with 10 random questions, just not related to anything else. And all I want you to do is just answer them. Don't think too much about them. And I'll be curious to see some of your answers. Are you ready for this?
Yes, I'm ready.
Awesome. Question number one. What is your morning drink of choice?
Water.
Water. You're the first person to say that. Okay. Okay. Cold? Are you one of those people that has to have ice in your water?
No, I keep a bottle of water next to my bed, and it's the first thing I drink when I wake up.
So are you a coffee person too?
I'm a coffee person when I'm at work dealing with kids, but other than that, no.
Is Dallas? I've never been to Dallas, and I've been around it, but never actually in the city itself. Is Dallas a? Does it have like a coffee like cafe culture, or is it just like Texas barbecue and that's it?
No, I think there's a fairly strong cafe culture here.
Okay,
Um,
okay,
I go to the Keurig in my office. I don't really, so
okay.
I can't
Well, there.
answer that question well.
All right. Question number two: what is a go-to, or who is a go-to musical artist for you?
My Chemical Romance.
Okay, I think I knew that answer. That's
I
good. That's
I
good.
think everyone who knows me even a little bit knew that answer.
Question number three. What movie can you watch over and over again and it never gets old?
Grease.
Oh, I hate that
I
movie.
know so
Oh my
many
god.
people hate that movie. You know what? I'm not ashamed. I love that movie.
No, that's fine. That's fine. All right. Number four. What's the last thing you read?
Um, Last thing I read or what I'm currently reading?
Either or.
I'm currently reading Destiny of the Republic, a tale of madness, medicine, and the murder of a president. It's about James Garfield. Um,
There's an era in history. Speaking of era in histories that is never really covered much in schools, I really think like post that time period between Grant's presidency and the crash in 29, minus Teddy Roosevelt, I think that is the least taught about era in American history
oh,
in any high school across the country. And it is fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating, that history. Some of those presidents that come through there, and how the takeoff of the American economy through the Industrial Revolution, and just Rockefeller and all. I just find that era, it doesn't get enough play, in my
some of the
opinion.
most
Doesn't get enough
interesting
play.
presidents we've had. And I
Yeah.
recently heard a statistic that's like only 7% of Americans can name the presidents from that time period.
Oh, I believe that. I believe that 100%. Yeah.
Speaking of Rockefeller, though, Chernow wrote a
Yeah.
great biography about him as well.
Okay.
It's called
Okay.
Titan,
Okay.
and it's good.
Titan.
Titan, yes, it's
Okay. All right. Question number 5. What's your favorite pizza topping?
extra cheese.
Okay. Fair enough. Number 6. Laying on the beach or going for a hike?
Laying on the beach as long as it's not a Texas beach.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Texas beaches are terrible.
Okay, okay, that might get you fired some places, but
That's
that's okay.
that's all right.
Uh, number 7, you've invited me over for dinner. What are you making?
Spaghetti. Spaghetti and meatballs.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Garlic bread or no?
Well, yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay, okay.
Can you eat
Number,
spaghetti and meatballs without garlic
well,
bread?
I think there are some people maybe that do.
If you do,
I
you're
don't know.
not coming for dinner.
Okay, fair enough. No, I enjoy that. I enjoy that. I enjoy that. Number 8, what is a dream vacation destination of yours?
Rome.
Ooh, Rome is good. Rome is good. Number 9, what's something you're afraid of?
Dolls.
Even like any size?
Terrified.
Did you have them when you were a kid?
Okay, I'm gonna tell this story real quick.
Okay.
I did have dolls when I was a kid. I had no problem with dolls until one day my sister taped a
Yes.
she taped a knife to the hand of my American Girl doll and stuck it outside my bedroom door. Um, and ever since then, I'm absolutely petrified of dolls.
That is a hilarious story. Okay, I gotta remember that the next time I see your sister, I'm gonna have to bring that up. Last last question. What job, other than your current one, would you love to have?
I would love to be a zookeeper.
Oh, really? Like
Yeah.
Tiger King type zookeeper?
Oh,
Or
no, oh my
oh,
gosh. I couldn't even finish that. Um,
I have to be honest. We didn't watch it, but I saw enough memes online,
oh, you don't even
and
have to watch it at this point.
right, that's how I feel. That's how I feel. Yeah, absolutely. Oh
No,
man,
a legit zookeeper. Oh,
that'd be
man.
cool. Yeah, that would be a cool job. Well, Jess, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you again. It's been way too long, and I'm so glad that you came on the podcast. You have a great story to tell. I don't think that's every day you get to hear from somebody that works in a museum. I think that's one of those jobs that people just don't even sometimes they don't even realize those they are jobs.
Mhm.
And I'm glad that you voiced the importance of museums because I agree with you 100%. They should be everybody should be going to museums all the time. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing this conversation with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Pleasure was all mine. Thanks, Jazz.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to Doug's Front Porch, a conversational podcast with your host, Doug Maidenford. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search for @Doug's Front Porch. Also, please feel free to tell all your friends about the show. And I'll see you all next time on my front porch.